Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of This Full Life. I'm Tara Davis. Today we are going to talk about a topic that is so up for me right now and that I have always loved to talk about and to coach through. It is on creating boundaries. So for the rest of this month, we are going to talk about boundaries, how we create them, why we create them, what they are. Like, what is a boundary? A lot of us don't even know what that looks like or what that is, or maybe we don't even know that we have the ability to create boundaries with other people, with other situations. So for the rest of this month, we're going to talk about all the different areas in our life that we can create boundaries. So why do we create boundaries? One of the reasons is to feel safe. When we need to have a tricky conversation with our partner, with our children, with our boss, with a coworker, if we have already set boundaries in place for ourselves, and if it's with a partner, you've already made that space available that you know these are the boundaries, this is what's said, this is what's not said. I feel really safe having that conversation. That is a boundary that keeps us feeling safe so that we know it's comfortable to let go, to let our feelings out, to unwind. So that is one of the reasons why we create boundaries. Creating boundaries also allows us to take ownership for ourselves without judging ourselves, without putting ourselves second or third or last. When we create a boundary for ourselves, we are saying, this is what works for me, and this is what doesn't work for me. This is what I'm willing to do. This is what I'm not willing to do. This is how I'm willing to talk and have a conversation. If this happens, I'm not willing to talk and have a conversation. So in creating those boundaries, we are creating self-care. We are creating a bubble for us to exist in. And I don't mean bubble as in we don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. We are creating a safe space and taking care of ourselves without judging ourselves. When we say this is a boundary for me, we are putting ourselves first instead of last. When others create boundaries, it actually allows us to use that example and realize, oh, these boundaries that this person is creating, they are so taking care of themselves. So I know that you can probably think of an example that comes up when someone it's maybe jarred you a little bit or just kind of taken you by surprise, you've kind of stepped back for a second and went, oh, wow, they really know themselves, or they're very clear on what they want or what they don't want. I know I've experienced it when someone has said, no, this is what I'm willing to do, and this is what I'm not willing to do. And I've thought to myself, wow, like that is so amazing because they are completely clear on what they're willing to do, what they are not willing to do, where they're willing to go, where they're not willing to go. That is creating boundaries. When other people offer me their boundaries, I'm very clear on what I can say, what I can't say, where I can go, where I can't go. It actually becomes a subconscious thing. Like when you start to create boundaries for yourself, it's super healthy. And it actually becomes subconscious in that you don't even have to think about it anymore. These boundaries are set in place so that this is how you live your life. And the boundaries can often be up for discussion. They can be up for renewal, up for, checking it out to see, are these still serving me? Are the boundaries that I have created still serving me in a way that I like? Or is it time to relook at them and decide, yeah, I'm ready to widen my boundaries. Conversely, yeah, I need to bring these boundaries back in for a little while before I can actually go back out with them. So boundaries can be completely fluid and fluctuating per our discussion, per our timeline, per our desires. Boundaries are also, when we get to discuss them and when we get to be fluid with them, they are accepting us right where we are. It's an acceptance of ourselves. So when we create a boundary, I invite you not to judge yourself from the point of, oh, I could be doing all this other stuff, or I'm creating this boundary and I think it should be a bigger boundary. I think it should be inclusive of so many other people, not just me. Or I want to create a boundary with my partner around how we have tricky discussions. Maybe I should be including him, or maybe I should be thinking, well, this is more acceptable. It's actually accepting us right where we are. And so if today this boundary feels really good for you, I invite you to accept that boundary right where you are today. Tomorrow, it might look different, and you might be willing to shift it a little bit tomorrow, or not. That boundary might need to stay in place for a while before you are willing to revisit and decide if you're willing to shift that boundary right or left and move it. Get clear on your boundaries. What do your boundaries look like? For example, when you're talking with your partner and you need to have a tricky discussion, have you set out boundaries with your partner, with your spouse, your husband, your wife, your children even, of what is good, what is not good, what you're willing to listen to, what you're not willing to listen to, and when a conversation is done and needs to be tabled? So have you said, hey, I would like to set a boundary that there is no name calling when we are in a heated discussion? And by the way, this could be done, it really needs to be done when you're both neutral, not in the middle of a heated discussion, because it usually doesn't work. So set boundaries. Like if you've realized our conversations in our relationship aren't going where I would like for them to go, realize that you can set boundaries. So if you've noticed that you or your partner is a name caller, set that as a boundary, because name calling does nothing to a conversation. It just takes it down deeper into the rabbit hole. It puts the other person on defense. I mean, I don't even need to say anymore. We all know what name calling does for an already heated and charged discussion. So maybe that's one of the ways that you set a boundary in your relationship. Oftentimes when we are trying to really shift and move conversations in a more positive direction, especially with our partner, if we're really consciously working in that space, we can set up an agreement and both sign it. That way we've really committed to keeping these boundaries in place so that we feel safe and that we know we can have that conversation. Do you have boundaries? Do you have boundaries set up that, yes, from this time to this time is specifically for me? And it might I might budge 5 or 10 minutes here and there. I'm not willing to give up this particular time. So if anything else comes in at that time, it's going to have to be shifted to another time. I'm not willing to let go of that time for me. So for me, right now we're in summer break, so it's a little bit more fluid and fluctuating. But for me, there's 2 hours in the morning when I get up. When that alarm clock goes off, I have specific things that I get done, and then I am to the gym. I go run. Actually, I've taken out running. Now I'm just doing the gym and 45 minutes of yoga that I'm just not willing to give up that space. For me, it's a connection to myself. It's a connection to source, to God, to the divine. It's reconnecting myself for the day. So that's a space of time that I am not willing to give up. That's a boundary for me. This is my time. When I have noticed myself shifting from that and just kind of, well, this is all granted when we're traveling or something comes up, it's got to give. But if I've willingly just let something else flow in and for, a random reason and given up my space and my time, I'm kind of grouchy the rest of the day. I almost am resentful. I'm mindful of that resentment and I don't take it out on the other people, but I notice within, I don't feel as connected. I don't feel as flowing as I normally would. And so I've realized that that is a particular time for me, a space for me, I really crave and I really desire. So that's a boundary for me. What is a boundary that you have created for yourself, self-care? What is it that you have created? Where are areas in your life that might need boundaries? Do you need boundaries in your conversation? I know a couple of times I've coached people in their workplace, and they've needed to create boundaries with a coworker, with a boss. And so the coworker or the boss or whomever it is that they were creating boundaries with, it was around communication. And they felt like they weren't being heard by these people, their coworkers or their boss. And so they learned to create boundaries in a space where they could feel comfortable. It wasn't up to the other person to read their mind and realize they felt uncomfortable. It was up to my clients to realize, I am uncomfortable in this space. What can I do about it? How can I make sure that I am comfortable speaking up in this position, speaking up in this situation so that I'm heard, so that I'm valued, so that I get validated? Otherwise, a lot of times if we don't create these boundaries and set some rules and just some rules, some play by the rules, then we oftentimes are unheard. We are not respected. Once we have created these boundaries and can adhere to our own spaces, like our own boundaries, we often then have created a space with so much self-confidence. Not that the boundaries don't need to be there, but almost as if they fall away because we realize that when that boundary is crossed, we automatically know exactly what to do. So with these clients that I helped encourage to create these different boundaries, they brought to me specific situations with their coworkers and with their boss where they felt uncomfortable or didn't know. They actually felt comfortable speaking up, but didn't know the exact words on how to have someone else hear them. And so we created these spaces so that my clients knew that they would be heard and that they could speak up in a safe space. Creating guidelines is also a way to feel safe with boundaries. So guidelines of, yes, I will do these certain things. No, I'm not willing to do these certain things. In the middle, there might be a gray area where you are willing to sway either way or not. I mean, maybe if creating boundaries is brand new for you, maybe your boundaries need to be black and white until you're very comfortable with having a little bit of a gray area in between. A lot of us, when we realize we have the ability and it's absolutely within our right to create boundaries, it feels really wonky and it feels really uncomfortable and awkward. And so having that gray space is almost a moot point. We can't even go there. I know when I first started, it felt very uncomfortable for me to tell my husband and my children, this is what I will do, this is what I won't do. Because I thought they wouldn't love me. I thought that I was pushing them away. In fact, it's quite the opposite. You are actually setting the stage for them to realize they can do the same. And so when you first start creating those boundaries, if it's really uncomfortable for you and kind of awkward and wonky and you're not quite sure and it's a little shaky, then I do encourage you to have it very clear on both sides of what you're willing to do, what you will do, and what you're not willing to do, or what you're not willing to be present with. If it's around conversation, yeah, then I invite you to be super clear on what that boundary looks like for you. This is what I'm willing to talk in this space. When we have a conversation, I'm really willing to listen to you. If this part of the conversation starts to go downhill like this, like it usually does, and you can have, several things named out, then what I am going to do to take care of myself is, and then have your guidelines ready. I'm going to take 5 minutes, or we're going to pause the conversation, or maybe we need a break for an hour, or maybe I just need to leave. It's self-care, it's self-preservation. And when we set these boundaries, we got to follow through. Again, that is actually part of the growth process that can be equally wonky and awkward and uncomfortable, because if we're not used to setting these boundaries and then we set these boundaries, we got to stick to it, right? We have to follow through to take care of ourselves and to take care of that relationship with our partner, the relationship with our coworkers, the relationship with our boss. I know a lot of times what we want to do is numb out or run away or change jobs or get another partner or get another boss, because actually what we're doing is just avoiding, right? We're just looking for an escape because we think the grass is probably greener on the other side. We're not learning. We're not growing. We're just changing and going a different direction. Maybe this is how we've operated our whole life. Maybe instead of bringing it full on and taking care of ourselves and creating these boundaries, learning how to create these boundaries, we've jumped from relationship to relationship, or we've jumped from job to job, or different bosses, or whatever it is that we have created to avoid creating boundaries. And I know you can relate. It's whatever your gig has been, whatever your go-to has been to avoid self-care and creating boundaries. So the boundaries also might be creating a physical boundary, creating a physical space. Maybe we really need to get away from a physically abusive situation. Maybe we need to separate ourselves from a partner who we're not sure what's going on, but maybe we just need to separate for a while. Maybe we need to create a physical space in between family. I mean, let's face it, it's not the best situation to talk about. However, I've been there. Like, I've had to literally create physical space in between myself and other family members while I was going through some major life changes, some major shifts in my life. That was a boundary for me, because I knew in order to continue to take care of me, I had to put me first and create that space and that boundary. And when and if I was ready to relook at that boundary, I knew that that time would come. I knew when it would be. I knew I would know when that time was right to relook at that boundary, and it did. And I did get to come back to, well, I've told you before, I've tried to create space. Apologies for the noise. My cat is in the background having fun with a fly. So I've had to create physical space for my partner, from my family members, because I was just really working through my own stuff. At the time, they weren't working to the depths that I was working and didn't understand what was going on. I had to create that physical space to take care of me in order to come back to that relationship a much more whole person than I was in the beginning. So for me, it was more of a self-preservation piece, a self-care piece. It was taking care of myself. Not that I wasn't concerned about everyone else. I knew that they could take care of themselves. I knew that I, at that point in my life, had to take care of me and put me first without the worry or concern about everyone else's thoughts. We are going to dive in deeper as the month continues into how to create these spaces, how to create these boundaries, what the boundaries look like for you. I'm going to give you tips on how to create boundaries in your conversations with your partner, tips on how to create boundaries with your coworkers, with your boss. I'm going to give you tips on how to create boundaries on physical space and what that looks like, how to create boundaries for self-care, how to create boundaries without judging yourself. So I look forward to talking with you the rest of the Tuesdays of this week and chatting more about how we create those boundaries within ourselves, how we let other people know, and how we stick to them. This journey can be sometimes so rocky and unbalanced. To be on this journey, part of finding ourselves and being on this journey is learning to know ourselves, learning about ourselves. Maybe we didn't really learn about ourselves growing up. Maybe we know a little bit about ourselves, but until you start creating those boundaries for yourself, that really gets in there so that you'll know yourself at a deeper, deeper level. You create more of a love for yourself. Okay, I hope this has served you. I know it's served you. I don't even hope, I know it's served you. And I would love to hear all of your comments. Ask me questions. Tell us about what those boundaries look like for you, how you've created those boundaries. How can I help you create more boundaries? I will see you next week.